Hi, and welcome to Whole Heart Transformation. I am Melissa Alguera, your personal identity life coach. Let's go to the podcast. Hey guys, welcome to Whole Heart Transformation. Today I want to talk about marital issues and what is keeping you stuck in your marriage. What is causing you to not move forward? And there's many things that keep us stuck, that keep us from moving forward, that keep us from having the connection that we desire. But there's a couple things today that I just wanted to share from my own personal experience in marriage over the last almost 19 years. And then with working with couples, a lot of things that I see in relational dynamics and breakdowns of marriage, how marriages go from a breakdown when there maybe wasn't anything that necessarily set that up, that was seen, like maybe cheating or any other sort of type of thing that could just break down a marriage, but it's just particularly certain ways that the person or people show up in the marriage that causes the breakdown over time. Or things like cheating that leads to a total marriage breakdown and how to mend and heal those things. So, with that being said, there's a couple things that I really wanted to focus on today because I find this to be some of the most common experiences with my couples. So, the first thing is an unrealistic expectation of what the marriage is going to look like. A lot of people go into marriage and they are subconsciously believing that, man, this person is going to take away my pain. This person is going to meet the needs of my childhood wounds. This person is going to rescue me. This person is going to fulfill all my dreams. And they get into the marriage and they realize, wow, that's actually not that. There's a lot of pain here. There's a lot of things that they're doing that I didn't think that they would do. It's not what I had envisioned. And we come in with these expectation when parts of us are not healed, when we are expecting somebody to heal aspects of us that they cannot heal, that they're not responsible to heal. Now, our partner who is healthy can hold space for those aspects of us that we were hoping to have in our relationship. They can hold the pain, they can hold the grief that, wow, this isn't what I thought it would be. And a lot of people that get stuck in this place, they either start looking outside the marriage to fulfill that particular fantasy or expectation, or they become bitter that the person that they're with isn't fulfilling that expectation that they had. So, what do you do with this? So, the best thing to do with this is to grieve. And you hear me say this a lot, like grief work is the essential tool for our life. And that's because grief, the process of grief, helps us to be in reality. Man, like noticing that this isn't what I had expected it to be, that my marriage didn't turn out the way that I had hoped for. And what I was longing for, that somebody could rescue or meet the need that I have deep inside. It takes grief work to really deal and feel with that pain and trauma of something that you didn't get as a kid. And now in your marriage, you're having to face the reality that that need is not being met. So you have to face reality. You have to grieve the loss of what you didn't get as a kid. And then now facing the reality and the loss that your marriage isn't going to solve that either, that the person in the marriage that you're with, they are not going to heal those young parts of you. And I often tell my clients, like, this is a past time. Like, that time is over. We cannot make up for what happened. We cannot make up for the loss. You cannot change the loss. The loss is the loss. And so we don't just say, oh, just get over it because it's not going to happen, or you can't do anything about that. No, actually, there is something that you do about that, is that you grieve the loss of that. You sit with that pain in your body until it shifts, until you can move forward. And we do this in relationship. We have to do this in relationship. And I got to be honest with you, don't do this with your partner. You need to do therapy with this or coaching with this. Come and see me. We do groups. There's so much healing in doing this with other people. And you cannot heal alone. Sorry, this is not how we're wired. We are wired to heal, to grow, to expand in connection and relationship. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is lack of ownership that keeps us stuck in our marriage. Now, what do you mean by that, Melissa? Well, I do take ownership. I do this and this and this. Lots of people have excuses for their ownership that they take. Maybe they take one aspect of the relationship and they say, "Oh, well, I do take ownership." But the reality is that we all have ownership. And I'm going to tell you from a very vulnerable place. So, when my husband and I were first married, even prior to marriage, there was an awareness for me, some sort of awareness that he had an issue. And instead of me really hitting that head on, being very curious about that, and going towards reality, I decided to ignore it and just hope it would go away and sweep it under the rug. And as I continued to ignore it, as I continued to look away, yes, I did try. I did try to find out what was going on at times. But because I had no internal capacity to face reality, I didn't grow up with that being my norm, facing reality. I grew up in spiritualizing things. That's the dynamic that I had. And so I had no concept of what it was like to face reality and then hold somebody accountable to the reality of what's really happening. And so I had to take ownership of my part that I played and allowing myself to subconsciously, right? Because it wasn't a conscious choice. I didn't say to myself, oh, he's cheating, he's looking at porn, whatever, I'm gonna look away from this. No, it wasn't like that. It was more like, oh, I don't know if I can handle what's behind the curtain. And so that was the embodied sense. It wasn't, again, it wasn't conscious, because conscious would be me being like, oh, I don't want to see behind the curtain. It was a subconscious thing. And so I had to take responsibility when the curtain was pulled back, when things became revealed. I had to take responsibility for how I showed up in those first 13 years of our relationship. I did turn a blind eye. I did avoid knowing the truth. I did maybe pursue it a little bit and then pull back. I didn't get the right help. I tried, but it wasn't what we actually needed. And so I had to take responsibility for the harm in my marriage. I had to take responsibility for turning a blind eye. I had to take responsibility for not building my own internal awareness of my childhood and how that actually led me into where I was with my husband. Not necessarily picking somebody that would betray me. That wasn't what I think I was being led into. It was more of like I didn't gain the skills over the years to face reality. And then because I didn't know how to face reality, then that led me into some of the toxic cycles with my relationship. And so once I took responsibility, I took the healing into my own hands, I owned my stuff, then I no longer was looking towards him and projecting stuff onto him. So, yes, is the reality that he did do things that were harmful that I have no ownership in? Absolutely. And maybe you haven't experienced betrayal in your marriage, but there are things in your relationship that you're not responsible for. That's valid and fair. And that person has to take ownership for them. And you can't take responsibility for that. You can only take responsibility for you. So, in short, taking ownership where you can leads to healing for you. Whether or not your partner chooses to do that, you have no control over that. But the good news is that you can take ownership, you can heal and grow, you can expand even if your partner chooses not to. All right, the next one. Projection. Let's talk about projection. So, if you haven't heard this word before, or maybe you have and you've heard it in a different way, projection comes from a lack of self awareness, a lack of self reflection. So, it's like I am projecting onto you something that's actually in me, something that I'm actually doing that I don't like, but I'm unaware that I'm doing this. Or projection can look like even a different type of unawareness, or lack of self reflection, where maybe my parent did something harmful to me, and I'm projecting that subconscious pain onto my spouse, or I'm projecting it onto somebody else. Like my dad did something and I'm unaware of that pain spot, but that pain spot gets triggered, and then I project that pain onto my husband. And that's a real thing. And it's real with all relationships. Many people even do this with like pastors. They project their father wounds or mother wounds onto their pastors. They project their father and mother wounds onto God. This is a real thing. Many people do this. And often, how you know that projection is happening is the person's response to what you're saying to them. Like it doesn't fit. Like it's like, and not even in the sense like they don't have ownership in some pain that might have happened or a pain that they poked on inside. Um, but the root of that pain is it lies somewhere else. And so they can own, I did poke the wound. I did poke the bear and then the bear became really big and explosive. However, I'm not responsible for the bear. I'm not responsible for the root of that pain. I'm just responsible for touching it somehow. And I can own that that wasn't helpful to you, or I can own that that wasn't good for you. But the person who's projecting, if they don't build their self awareness, if they don't build that internal questioning and curiosity, then they're going to project their stuff onto you. They're going to project their reason for becoming explosive when something triggers them, or freezing when something triggers. And so projection is a lack of self-awareness of what's happening inside. And it takes the skill of reflection to be able to overcome projecting things. And it's really not fair to our spouse for us to project our childhood stuff, projecting our relationship with our mom or our dad onto our partner. It's not fair to our partner because our partner is just kind of left clueless. And then our partner is stuck with that. Because ultimately, if you're projecting a parent onto your partner, then that leaves you, the victim, and the partner responsible to fix that pain. Now, if the partner is healthy, the partner is going to go, that's on you. You're freezing. You're going towards people pleasing. You're going towards explosive anger or whatever. That's on you to figure out where that is in your body, what that's coming from, and I can't fix that. Now I can tiptoe around that so you don't get activated, but the reality is you're going to be activated with that again because it's still stuck in your body. So this is projection where we are taking something that is not known to us. It's a blind spot in us, and we're projecting that. We are instead of going inward and going, I wonder why I'm freezing or screaming right now or fawning right now. I'm wondering why I'm doing that. Instead of having that curiosity, we're just reactive, and we're saying this other person is responsible for how we are showing up, which is never ever ever the case. Okay. So the next one is immaturity. I This one I kind of laugh about. I was just thinking about this the other day. I saw this picture of this guy, and and I'm sorry if you do this. Okay, I'm sorry if you do this. I'm not trying to be rude or shame you, but here's just the reality. I see this guy. He's like probably a 50-year-old man, and he looks like a teenager. Like he's dressed like a teenager. He doesn't, he looks very young in his face. And yeah, okay, like great. You could still look young, but there's like, oh, what comes over me when I think about this is a sense of disgust, because people that grow and expand as adults, they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily drawn to those things that they were as a teenager. Now, not to say that you can't like love those things and like, have that be something that you participate in. I know there's things with my daughter that she's a teenager, so I participate in it, but I have evolved like as an adult. And so I'm not drawn and enveloping myself, hopefully that's the right word. Yes, enveloping myself in a teenager type of mannerism or internal being. So when we are not growing and expanding emotionally, we kind of get stuck in time and frozen in time, and we will do things out of immaturity. We will continue to behave and act immature. And so this looks like, a little bit of what I kind of described to you. And not to say, who knows, this person that I'm talking about they could be totally mature and had a one-off day, or like not a one-off day, but like a day where they decided to wear a silly shirt or whatever. Who knows? Okay. But the majority of the time when I see that, I'm like, oh, there's probably an aspect of themselves that's kind of frozen in the teenage years. They didn't get to develop past their teen years. And I see this a lot. I see this a lot in sexuality where somebody is kind of stuck as a teenager, and whatever they discovered or explored as a teenager sexually, they are stuck and frozen in that type of sexuality. So it's very giggly. It's very like, oh, like I always saw your whatever, and this is very immature in how we are handling sexuality. And so there's a lack of growth. There's an immaturity there in our adulthood. And so when we show up in relationship immature, if our partner is mature and grown in these areas, there's going to be some disgust that comes up about that. Like, having a teenager as a partner is kind of, it's icky, right? Because I don't like, for me, I don't want to be married to a kid. Like, I don't know if you want to be married to a kid or somebody who's acting like a kid, in a way where they're not necessarily doing that to involve themselves with their children, but just that is actually where they're stuck as like a kid. And so, pouting and defensiveness in a lot of ways is a very immature response. And when I say immature, I'm actually saying like developmentally immature. And so defensiveness is very similar to immaturity that I've seen a lot in my own kids. Like my daughter, right now, she's 13, and I'm not throwing her under the bus. It's actually the right place for her to be right now. This is where she should be. But there's a lot of defensiveness that's happening, and the disconnection in her body as she's doing certain things and going certain ways, because kids, this is they kind of, they're, as you're kind of transitioning from a child to a teen to an adult, there's things that have to be developed along the way. And so just recently she's in a new stage, and I'm noticing a lot of defensiveness, which isn't her normal mo. And so there must be a developmental stage. Now, can you imagine if she just gets stuck in this place? And I'm like, for example, I asked her to do something. I can't even remember what it was, but I was like, "Hey, can you do da 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 da?" And then she says to me, "Well, Ezekiel didn't do blah 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 blah." Well, he's 6, right? Like her standards that are required for her, and his standards that we require for him are very different. Like we cannot combine those. His brain is doesn't have the full development as hers does, and hers is still developing too. And so it was just really interesting how she responded. Well, Ezekiel didn't do XYZ. And so I was like, yeah, like he didn't. And that's because you guys are in developmentally different stages of life. And so the requirements for you are going to be different than the requirements for him. Just like with school, like he's learning addition and subtraction, and you're learning pre-algebra and algebra. It can't be the same. Now, some people are really smart. But anyway, so could you imagine if she got stuck in that? She went to work and she's like, oh, like so and so didn't do this and I did, or I have to, her boss would be like, are you kidding me right now? And so you see this a lot in marriages. It's like tit for tat. I'm sharing how I'm experiencing the way you show up in the house, or the way you show up with the kids, or whatever it is. And if the partner's reactive with that defensiveness and saying, well, you don't do blah blah blah, and this over here, I did this, and you didn't do this, that is an immature response in relationship. And so this can be a very big issue in marriage, because if one person is trying to share and get their needs met through sharing, and the other person is just coming with defensive, there's not going to be a resolve. There's not going to be connection. There's not going to be a way to come back together. And so we have to take ownership and start developing those areas where we've become defensive because we don't feel secure in ourselves, or we feel inadequate in ourselves. And so defense of ourself is easier than growth. And then the last thing, and of course, like I said, there's multiple things here. I'm just pulling this up. There's multiple things here that lead to a marriage breakdown or stuck or disconnection. But one of the things that I find the most common, and this is probably not going to surprise you if you've listened to any of my stuff or if you're trying to grow, it is attachment issues. It's where, you might have avoidant attachment and you have a partner that has anxious attachment or disorganized, and you're trying to connect through all of your nervous system issues. And maybe we don't hear clearly in those nervous system issues, and we're unaware of what is happening inside of us when our attachment is threatened. And so, the thing is that the majority of people didn't grow up with secure attachment. I don't care what anybody says. Like I think I've maybe met one person in all of the years that I've lived my life and been doing this work specifically that has secure attachment. And so, and I've seen the results of that. I see that the person, like I had a couple session a couple weeks ago, and the male client actually grew up in a securely attached place. And it was so beautiful to see his response to his wife, who did not grow up in secure attachment. She has like the anxious or the fearful avoidant attachment. And so he grew up insecure. So when she shared her pain, he immediately moved in. He wasn't trying to fix her, he was listening to her, he was validating her experience. And that actually caused her nervous system to calm down and see him in the fruit and the reality of who he is. But when she wasn't able to see him and who he is, and out of her own attachment, fearful, avoidant, or anxious, avoidant pain, then that led her to see him as an enemy and see or have pain in her body that she's going to lose connection. And how we react out of those places causes the most pain for us. And really what it is like when we have fearful avoidant, it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if I'm going to get connection again with you. And so there's panic. Or it doesn't feel safe to connect. Those that have dismissive avoidant, it doesn't feel safe to connect. Or when you have disorganized attachment, it's like you try to connect and you go and move in towards connection, and then you remind yourself subconsciously that it's not safe to connect. And so these have lasting effects on our relationships. And if we don't take the time to really observe how we're showing up, what's happening inside of us, we are going to have disconnection that leads to a marriage that is stuck or that has to be completely divorced and removed out of. And the really hard thing about that is, like, if you don't do the healing work, then you decide to get in another relationship and then you find yourself in a very similar place, because at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to own how we show up in a marriage. And we cannot say about anyone else that how we show up is based on the other person, because ultimately we have to take responsibility for ourselves. So that way we can be the best version of ourselves and the best version for our partner, even if they can't show up the way that we want them to. All right, you guys, thanks for listening. If you have found today's podcast helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. If you are interested in coaching with me, go to www.identitylife.coach. And you can also find me on Instagram, identity.life.coach.